2024 is now over, and the world celebrates the arrival of 2025. At least most of it. Many world leaders are very nervous about the incoming US President, Donald Trump. He's announced that he's going to implement a new series of tariffs across the world. But what are tariffs? Why are they important? And is this a good idea or a bad idea for the United States and the world? Today on War Made Simple, we'll discuss the incoming Trump tariffs. Hey guys, Bill here. Welcome back to another episode. I hope you guys had a very Merry Christmas and are having a very Happy New Year. So, with that being said, let's start our new year off with the discussion on Trump tariffs. So I'm not going to get into the individual tariffs themselves. I'll talk about some generalities with some of the tariffs, but not every nitty-gritty. What I want to talk about is overall the kind of different responses that have been seen to it, both here in the States and overseas. But before we talk about the actual tariffs, let's talk about what a tariff is. So a tariff is basically a fee associated with any sort of import or any sort of good that arrives from overseas. Whenever something comes into our ports or any ports, there is a fee associated with getting it into the country. This is called a tariff. Now, this tariff can range. It can cover things from entire industries, or it can cover a specific product. It really depends on what's being targeted. Why we use tariffs? Well, primarily as a source of income. You can get a lot of money from using tariffs because basically you just set a percentage rate and it comes in as raw cash that people have to pay to sell products in your country. The second reason is to protect the local industries. And this is something that Trump is really pushing for quite a bit, at least in the rhetoric he's using to justify the tariffs at least. So with a tariff kind of being put in place, what does the Trump tariffs look like? Well, Trump's targeting specifically 3 regions, I'll call them. First one's going to be Asia, and that's the Chinese specifically. The second one is here in North America, being Canada and Mexico, and the third one is the Europeans. So let's start with the Europeans. Europe overall has been very poorly receiving this news because, well, they're US allies for the most part. And hearing that they're about to be hit by US tariffs is something that none of them are very excited for. And many of them are pushing back big time, particularly France and Germany. The EU as a whole hasn't really made moves because they're not really sure which parts of the European Union are going to be affected the most. So they're kind of waiting for the full tariff plan to come out from Trump because there is still some cleaning up on the sides to do for that. Now let's go to North America, being Canada and Mexico. Canada and Mexico have kind of jumped on board the US bandwagon because they're trying to avoid the tariffs outright. Trump said that if they do not get the border under control, both Mexico and Canada will be subject to a 25% tariff. That's a pretty big deal for these economies. So this means that Canada and Mexico are trying to do what they can to get their borders under control to avoid those tariffs because they can't handle the hit to their economies. So last but certainly not least is China. China is very, very angry about this because Trump could potentially put the tariff amount from around the 10 to 20% it is now to 70%. So slamming the Chinese with a massive series of tariffs. And this could devastate their economy if used correctly. And Trump knows this. So the Chinese don't look like they're going to give in to the American pressure on that, but they very, very, very much don't want to get hit with an economic recession right now. So that's the overseas view. What's the view here in the States? Well, like normal, we have the left and the right. The left is saying that if this goes forward, this could potentially destabilize regions and also cut ties with allies overseas. The Europeans are our allies, so putting tariffs on them is not going to be seen as a popular move. Additionally, it's not just limited to overseas, this could directly affect our economy. If these foreign nations decide to slap more tariffs on goods coming from their nation to our nation, it could very much affect prices here at home. And this could be a very, very huge problem at a time when budgets are already tight across the country. So Democrats are saying this is going to be a huge problem. The Republicans, on the other hand, are very excited about this. And this means that they could potentially compete with foreign companies here on US soil. It means that they won't have to fight as hard to sell their products because they can be priced at the same amount with incoming tariffs. So the right is very excited about this, the left is not so much, which is about par for the course. The last perspective we got to consider when looking at the tariffs is Trump's himself. Why would he choose tariffs specifically to announce and basically threaten the world with? Well, because he sees a lot of the deals that we've made across the planet as pretty unfair to the United States, and there is a lot of credence to that. So let's take a look at how Mexico and Canada responded to it. So like we said before, Mexico and Canada kind of jumped on board the US bandwagon because they couldn't afford the hits. Trump didn't intend, at least by what we're seeing now, on actually hitting them with those tariffs. It was a threat made to say, hey, we need you guys to address this problem on your side, and we're going to address it on our side. This is what we want you doing. Is it unfair to those countries? Yes, but is it considered a major issue that he campaigned on and needs to address? 100%. So he's fulfilling a campaign promise using that. Now, when it comes to Europe, it's more about leveling the playing field. Trump sees that the European powers have had pretty much the same open access to the American economy since the Marshall Plan after World War II, and it really hasn't changed too much. The Europeans have been able to tariff more American goods, and the Americans really haven't returned in kind for the most part. So Trump's looking to try and even the playing field, at least from his point of view. Lastly is China, and this is probably the one that Trump actually is going to hit with tariffs because the Chinese are not backing down, and Trump very much wants to get them kind of out of being a danger to the United States, because right now they very much are a danger both militarily and economically. So this is Trump's way of kind of putting China in a corner and making sure that at least they shouldn't be able to push out too much. That's in theory at least, because if things that the Republicans say go well, then great, it works very well. But if the Democrats hold sway on what actually happens, it's not going to go very well for Trump. So that's kind of the whole playing field right now, for lack of a better term. And what we'll see in this next year is ultimately if nations are going to cave to Trump's demands, or if they're going to stand up to Trump's demands. And if they do stand up, if there's going to be a negotiation, or if Trump's just not going to want to have a discussion. So regardless, it's going to be a very interesting year, and we might see a lot of fluctuations with prices here in the States and overseas, depending on where you get your products from. But that's all I got for now. So for the time being, I will leave you guys until Monday, where we are going to be talking about the 6th generation fighters and some of the other technology that China just dropped, because there's been a lot of interesting stuff going on in China over the last week and a half, 2 weeks. So, but with that being said, I'll see you guys on Monday. Take it easy.